I never thought I'd be that woman. The one who crosses the line, who betrays, who falls into something forbidden. But life has a way of twisting you into a version of yourself you no longer recognize. It started with loneliness. My husband, Daniel, and I had been together for 10 years. A decade of routine of the same conversations, the same dull kisses, the same quiet nights spent in separate corners of the house. I missed passion. I missed feeling wanted. And then there was him. Ethan, younger, bolder, full of fire. He worked at the same law firm as me, and from the moment we locked eyes, I knew I was in trouble. He made me feel something I hadn't felt in years, desired. Alive. I tried to resist at first. The stolen glances, the innocent brushes of hands, the lingering smiles. But temptation is a slow burn, and once it catches, it's impossible to put out. One late night at the office changed everything. I stayed behind to finish some paperwork, and so did he. The tension between us was unbearable. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, careful. "You deserve to be happy, you know." I looked at him, my heart pounding. "I am happy." It was a lie, and we both knew it. He stepped closer. I could feel the heat radiating off his body, the way his breath ghosted over my skin. My entire body ached for something I hadn't had in so long. And when his lips finally met mine, I didn't pull away. That night, I made a choice. A selfish, reckless choice, and I had no idea just how much I would regret it. That first night with Ethan changed everything. I told myself it would be just once, just a moment of weakness, a secret I'd bury deep inside. But once you taste something forbidden, it's impossible to go back. I started finding excuses to stay late at work. Business trips became more frequent. My phone was always in my hand, waiting for his messages, my heart racing every time his name lit up my screen. With Ethan, I felt like a different woman. I wasn't just Daniel's wife, stuck in a predictable marriage. I was someone exciting, someone desired. Every touch, every stolen night in a hotel room, every whispered promise made me feel alive in a way I hadn't in years. But affairs have a way of bleeding into real life. And soon, the cracks in my marriage became too obvious to ignore. Daniel noticed. At first, it was small things, me coming home later than usual, the way I avoided his touch, how I smiled at my phone when I thought he wasn't looking. Then one night, he confronted me. "You've been different," he said, watching me carefully from across the dinner table. "Distant." I swallowed hard. "Work has been stressful." He nodded slowly, his eyes dark. "Right, work." The guilt was unbearable. I wanted to stop. I told Ethan we had to end it, that I couldn't keep doing this. But he didn't make it easy. "You don't love him anymore," he whispered one night, tracing my lips with his thumb. "You're just scared to admit it." I wanted to deny it, but deep down, I wasn't sure if he was wrong. I thought I could control the situation. I thought I could have this secret part of me and still go back to my life with Daniel. I had no idea that Daniel already knew everything. I should have seen the signs. The way Daniel stopped asking questions, how he watched me instead like he was studying my every move. He was quieter, more distant. I thought it was just another phase in our dull marriage. Then one night, he did something unexpected. "I booked us a weekend away," he said casually over dinner. "A cabin by the lake." I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth. "What?" "We need time, just us." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Unless there's something keeping you here." Guilt clawed at my throat. I should have been relieved. Maybe this was our chance to fix things, to reset. But all I could think about was Ethan. I agreed. Hopping the trip would silence the storm inside me. The cabin was beautiful, isolated, quiet, the kind of place meant for intimacy. But I felt on edge the entire time. Daniel was different, not the man I had neglected for months, not the distant husband I had betrayed. He was lighter, relaxed. One night, as we sat by the fire, he turned to me and asked, "Are you happy, Claire?" The question sent panic through me. "Of course," I lied. He let out a quiet laugh, shaking his head. "I used to think we were broken, that it was my fault." He looked at me, eyes unreadable. "But now, I think I see things clearly." Something in his tone made my stomach twist. "What do you mean?" I whispered. Daniel leaned back in his chair, swirling his glass of whiskey. I know about him. The world tilted, my heart stopped. I've known for a while. His voice was calm, too calm. You thought you were being careful, didn't you? Staying late at work. Sneaking around. The way you look at your phone like it's the only thing keeping you breathing. My entire body went cold. Daniel, He held up a hand. Don't, I'm not here to hear your excuses, I just wanted you to know. Tears burned at the back of my eyes. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. He sighed, finishing his drink. The funny thing, ever since I found out I've felt free, lighter, like I don't have to try anymore. I swallowed hard. What are you saying? He stood up, stretching like he had just woken up from a deep sleep. I'm happier without you, Claire. His words shattered me more than any fight, more than any betrayal. Because for the first time I realized I had lost him. I couldn't breathe. The fire crackled between us, but all I felt was ice. Daniel wasn't yelling, he wasn't angry, and somehow that was worse. You don't mean that, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He gave me a small, almost pitying smile. Don't I? I felt sick. My stomach twisted into knots as I searched for something, anything, to say that would undo this. My voice cracked. I made a mistake. His expression didn't change. No, Claire, a mistake is forgetting an anniversary. A mistake is saying something you don't mean in a fight. What you did, that was a choice. Tears burned in my eyes. I didn't mean to. But you did. His voice was soft, steady, like he had already made peace with everything. And now I don't have to pretend anymore. I shook my head. What does that mean? He exhaled slowly, staring into the fire. For years, I kept trying. I thought if I worked harder, if I was more patient, if I could just make you happy, things would go back to the way they used to be. He turned back to me. But I see it now. You were never going to choose me. That's not true, I whispered. He chuckled, shaking his head. Claire, you're not even sorry you did it. You're just sorry you got caught. A sob broke from my throat, my hands trembling as I reached for him. Please, Daniel, don't do this. Don't throw everything away. He looked at my hands but didn't take them. You already did. Silence settled between us, heavy and suffocating. Then in the calmest voice he said, I want a divorce. The words knocked the air from my lungs. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. I had expected anger, screaming, maybe even some kind of ultimatum. But not this. Not the quiet acceptance, not the realization that he was done. I shook my head, the tears falling freely now. Daniel, we can fix this, please. He just stood there, watching me break. And then, he said the words that shattered me completely. I don't need to fix anything, Claire. I'm finally free. And just like that, I realized I had lost him forever. The ride home was silent. Daniel drove like he didn't have a care in the world, like the weight of our marriage was no longer on his shoulders. Meanwhile, I sat there, drowning in the wreckage of what I had done. I wanted to beg, to cry, to make him see that I still loved him. But how could I? How could I ask him to love me when I had betrayed him so completely? When we got home, he didn't even glance at me. He grabbed his bag from the trunk, walked inside, and headed straight to the bedroom. I followed, my heart pounding. Daniel, please, we can talk about this. He started pulling his clothes from the closet, folding them neatly into a suitcase. Panic rose in my throat. You're leaving. He didn't look at me, for a while. For a while, I repeated, my voice cracking. So this isn't final. He let out a quiet sigh. Claire, it was final the moment you let someone else touch you. His words hit like a knife to the chest. I clutched the edge of the dresser to steady myself. I love you, I whispered. He finally turned to me, his expression unreadable. Maybe you do, but not the way I needed. Tears welled in my eyes. I can be better, I can. His lips pressed into a thin line. I don't want you to be better, Claire. I want to be happy. And that's when I realized he already was. Somewhere in the pain of my betrayal, he had found freedom. He wasn't trying to hurt me. He wasn't trying to punish me. He was just done. He zipped his suitcase, slung it over his shoulder, and without another word, he walked past me. I stood there, frozen, listening as the front door opened and closed. And just like that, my husband, my safe, steady, loving husband, was gone. And for the first time, I knew what real loneliness felt like. The silence in the house was unbearable. I sat on the edge of our bed, my bed now, staring at the empty space where Daniel's clothes used to be. The smell of his cologne still lingered in the air, but he was gone. And it was my fault. For days I tried to reach him. I called, I texted. At first he didn't respond. Then, finally, a single message came through. "Please stop, Claire, just let me go." It shattered me. I should have fought harder for us before it was too late, before I let myself get lost in something that was never real. "Ethan." He still texted me, still called, still acted like we had a future. But now, when I looked at his name on my screen, all I felt was disgust. Not at him, at myself. I had ruined my marriage for a man who was never going to love me the way Daniel did. I ignored Ethan's calls, deleted his messages, and the more I pulled away, the more I realized he was never what I wanted. I wanted my husband. I wanted my life back. But Daniel wasn't coming home. I tried to keep myself busy, work, friends, anything to numb the pain, but the nights were the worst. Lying in that empty bed, staring at the ceiling, I felt like a stranger in my own home. And then, one evening, I saw him. I was walking to my car after work when I spotted him across the street. Daniel. He was sitting outside a cafe, laughing at something. And he wasn't alone. A woman sat across from him. Pretty, confident. The way he looked at her, it was different, light, like he was free. My chest tightened. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. Because in that moment, I realized something that broke me more than anything else. Daniel was happier without me. And no matter how much I regretted it, no matter how many times I wished I could take it all back, I had lost him forever. I stood there, frozen, watching Daniel laugh with her. It wasn't just polite laughter, it was real, effortless, the way he used to laugh with me before everything went wrong. And then he reached for her hand. My breath caught in my throat. My stomach twisted so hard, I thought I was going to be sick. I wanted to tell myself it was innocent, that it didn't mean anything, but I knew better. I had been that woman once, the one who made him smile, who made him forget everything else. But now, I was just the mistake he had walked away from. I turned and got into my car before he could see me. My hands trembled as I gripped the steering wheel. My heart pounded so loud I could hear it in my ears. I thought I had more time. I thought maybe, just maybe, there was still a chance. But I was too late. That night, I lay in bed, staring at my phone, my thumb hovering over his name. I wanted to text him, say something, anything. But what was there to say? I had already lost. Days passed, then weeks. I stopped trying to contact him. It was clear now he had moved on. But I hadn't. I still woke up expecting to hear him in the kitchen. I still reached for his side of the bed. I still felt his absence like a wound that refused to heal. And the worst part, I couldn't be mad at him. Because for the first time in a long time, Daniel was happy. And I was the one who had destroyed us. I thought affairs were about excitement, about passion, but in the end, all I had left was regret. And the man I had taken for granted, he was finally free from me. I never knew regret could feel like this. It wasn't just sadness, it was suffocating, a constant ache that settled deep in my bones, whispering you did this every time I woke up alone. Daniel had moved on. I saw him again a few weeks later, at a grocery store of all places. He looked different, lighter, like a weight had been lifted off him. And she was with him, the woman from the cafe. They weren't holding hands, but they didn't have to. I could see it in the way he leaned into her when she spoke, the way she smiled up at him. It was so natural, so easy. I turned down another aisle before he could see me, my chest tightening. This was my reality now. A life without Daniel. A life I had chosen the moment I let Ethan touch me. Ethan! I hadn't spoken to him in weeks. I ignored his messages, his calls, and eventually they stopped. Just like that, he disappeared, like he had never really mattered at all. Because he didn't. That realization hurt the most. I had thrown away my marriage, my home, my life, for something that wasn't even real. That night, I sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at a glass of wine I didn't even want to drink. A year ago, Daniel would have been sitting across from me, reading the news or absent-mindedly rubbing my foot under the table. A year ago, we were still us. I let out a shaky breath, rubbing my hands over my face. Would he ever forgive me? I didn't know. But I did know one thing. Daniel was happier now. And maybe, just maybe, I had to find a way to be happy without him too. The hardest part wasn't losing Daniel. It was knowing he didn't need me anymore. For years, I had been the center of his world. His wife, his partner. Even when things got dull, even when our love felt like it was running on autopilot, I still had him. But now, I was nothing to him, a mistake he had learned from, a lesson he had already moved past. And I was still here, stuck. One night, after too many glasses of wine, I did something stupid. I called him. The second I heard the ringing, I wanted to hang up, but before I could, he answered. Claire, his voice was steady, unreadable. I closed my eyes, gripping the phone tight. Hey. Silence, not the comfortable kind, the kind that felt like a wall between us. What do you need? He finally asked. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I wanted to say, I need you. Instead, I whispered, I miss you. Another long pause, then a quiet sigh. Claire. I know, I choked out before he could say it. I know I don't deserve you, I know I ruined everything, but I had to say it. More silence, then finally his voice, calm, steady, final. I forgave you a long time ago. Tears stung my eyes. Then why? Because forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean going back. His words cut deeper than I expected. I wiped at my face, biting down on my lip to stop the sob rising in my throat. Are you happy? I forced myself to ask. A pause, then a quiet, simple yeah. And that was it, the answer I had been dreading. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Okay. Take care of yourself, Claire. The line went dead. I sat there, staring at my phone, realizing that this was really it. Daniel was happy without me. And now, I had to figure out how to be happy without him. The call with Daniel was the final blow. I sat there for hours, replaying his voice in my head, the quiet way he said he had forgiven me, but would never come back. It was over, truly over. For weeks, I walked around in a haze, haunted by memories of the life I had thrown away. Our Sunday mornings in bed, the way he'd pull me close before falling asleep, the quiet comfort of knowing someone chose me every single day. I had taken it all for granted. And now, I was left with nothing but regret. I could have let it consume me. Some days I wanted it to. But something shifted inside me after that call. Daniel was happy without me. I had spent so much time mourning him, missing him, wishing I could go back. But what if I stopped looking backward? What if I started choosing myself the way he had chosen himself? So I did. I deleted his number. I stopped checking his social media. I stopped wondering if he thought about me the way I thought about him. And instead, I thought about me. I started therapy. I admitted my mistakes. I faced the truth that I had let my own unhappiness push me into something reckless, something selfish. I couldn't undo the past. But I could learn from it. One evening, months later, I walked past the same cafe where I had last seen Daniel. He wasn't there. But even if he had been, I knew I wouldn't have turned away this time. Because I finally understood something. Losing him wasn't just the worst thing that ever happened to me. It was also the thing that set me free. I had destroyed my marriage. But for the first time since it all fell apart, I realized I still had a chance to rebuild myself. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough.